And we'll begin by taking refuge, and you're welcome to join in. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. And I take refuge in Sangha. Right. So I'd like to transition. We've been exploring the engaged Buddhism precepts, and I want to, for the summer, start working with koans. Koans are teaching stories, and the ones that I want to explore often involve a dialogue, usually between someone in the teaching role and someone in the student role, but sometimes between two people who are, more peers, either two teachers, two students. And one of the great things that I love about the Zen tradition is even those of us who find ourselves in the teaching role are also students. and that's a forever path of, continuing to practice and awaken and develop the heart of compassion. So the teaching stories are often like these snapshots of someone's life, and they really meet us in the heart of our lives, in the heart of our spiritual questions, in the heart of a place of confusion about the path, or inquiry into the path, or exploration of what is the expression of the path. And so they have this timeless quality of here we are in our human experience doing this spiritual practice that has a timeless quality to it, and meeting the inner complications of life, meeting the external complications of life, and seeing how all of that is part of the path of awakening. So I feel like koans are an extension of engaged Buddhism. And one of the beautiful aspects about koan practice, and this is similar, you probably have experienced this in Dharma talks or other kinds of Dharma dialogues that you've been involved in your practice, is that they can meet us on all these different levels. So whatever question we have in our minds, sometimes we can find something in the Dharma talk or in the koan that meets us, whether it's a situation that we're trying to negotiate that happens externally at work or in one of our relationships, or a situation that's more an internal conflict. We're hearing a lot of different voices and getting pulled in a lot of different ways. Sometimes the koan can reveal something or give us some medicine or perspective on that level. And then other times, perhaps the koan touches something deep in us and we don't really even know what, but we feel perhaps a sense of oneness or wonder or awe, or we're drawn into one of the images. Another thing about koan practice is they're often image rich. And that's is one of the aspects of this spiritual technology that I really love and appreciate in the Zen tradition, is that we get these images, whether it's in sutras or the chants or in koan practice or in a Dharma talk, and we can let the image keep us company and work with it as a teaching in and of itself. And sometimes the image can really meet us on all of those different levels, and it's something we can come back to in our meditation, as well as throughout the day. Oh yeah. So I want to talk about a koan called Chiyono's, No Water, No Moon. And this is from the Hidden Lamp collection, which is a collection of koans from the women ancestors. So let me read the koan first, and then I'll offer some commentary on it, and then we'll leave some time for discussion, inquiry. I'd love to hear from you. Chiyono's No Water, No Moon. Chiyono was a servant in a Zen convent who wanted to practice Zazen. One day she approached an elderly nun and asked, "I'm of humble birth. I can't read or write and must work all of the time. Is there any possibility that I could attain the way of the Buddha, even though I have no skills?" The nun answered, "That's wonderful, my dear. In Buddhism, there is no distinction between people. There is only this: each person must hold fast to the desire to awaken and cultivate a heart of great compassion. People are complete as they are. People are complete as they are. If you don't fall into delusive thoughts, there is no Buddha and no sentient beings. There is only one complete nature. If you want to know your true nature, you need to turn toward the source of your delusive thoughts. This is called Zazen." Chiyono said with happiness, "With this practice as my companion, I only have to go about my daily life practicing day and night." After months of wholehearted practice, she went out on a full moon night to draw some water from the well. The bottom of her old bucket, held together by bamboo strips, suddenly gave way, and the reflection of the moon vanished with the water. When she saw this, she attained great realization. Her enlightenment poem was this: "With this and that, I tried to keep the bucket together. Then the bottom fell out. Where water does not collect, the moon does not dwell. Where water does not collect, the moon does not dwell." So it was the full moon on Monday, so I thought appropriate time to introduce, or not on Monday, on Friday, appropriate time to introduce this koan. Today is Monday. A little thrown off. So here's the snapshot of an interaction. We have this interaction, right? And it's just this tiny snapshot, right? So we don't know from this koan a whole lot about Chiyono's life, a lot about the elder nun that she talks to. Was that their first and only interaction? Was this teaching, or was she in regular contact with this teacher? I would guess probably regular contact. So we have this snapshot of someone with a sincere aspiration who doesn't have the luxury of time to do a lot of formal practice. And she says, "I have to work all of the time." And she also has some self-doubt about her capacity to awaken, to really do spiritual practice. Perhaps she's comparing herself to the other nuns around her and feeling like, oh, they have, these skills that I don't have. They have these qualities that I don't have. So is this koan relatable? My teacher would always say, like, this koan, all koans are about us. They're about us, and they have like this historical reference of these real human beings, but also they're about us. So koans give us a snapshot into the human experience and are often relatable on some level. Who here has doubted their capacity to actually do this practice of awakening? Who here has wondered, is it actually possible given my other commitments? Given my responsibilities, given the lifestyle that I have and have to have because of, the situation that I'm in. Can I wake up? Can I actually do this? Do I have enough time? Am I doing enough? Is this for me? All of these questions are part of Chiyono's question. She has this sincere aspiration, and she also has doubt. And so in her case, in Chiyono's case, she approaches a kind, compassionate nun who's able to meet her right where she's at. And I think that's an important part of what the nun says to Chiyono isn't necessarily what she would say to one of the other students. Another student might not be struggling with self-doubt, so she might be a little more like direct or harsh, or like kind of, sometimes we talk about Zen teachers like pulling the rug out from under us. And other times, teachers are there to offer support and validation and kind of like, give that quality of compassion. Yes, you can do this. You do have the capacity to do this. So I want to just remind us what her teacher said. She said, "There's only this. Each person must hold fast to the desire to awaken and cultivate a heart of compassion. People are complete as they are. If you don't fall into delusive thoughts, there is no Buddha and no sentient beings. There is only one complete nature. If you want to know your true nature, you need to turn towards the source of your deluded thoughts. This is called Zazen." So really, in that, she summarized the path. Like, first step on the path, sincere aspiration to awaken. So she's verifying for Chiyono, you have that. You have this sincere aspiration to awaken. If I look back at my own training, I can see how my teachers did that for me. Like how I would show up at Sanzen, especially when I wasn't living at the monastery. When I was living in Portland, I would bike to see Hogen Roshi every Sunday. And he would ask me why I'm there. And I would never be able to answer. But that, like, in a way, he was helping me clarify and see my aspiration. And he was valuing it. I can see that now. I could see that then too. I would bike away and I would be just like so filled with this like spiritual energy, so filled with my aspiration. And I would be so like annoyed with myself that I couldn't articulate it for him. And at the same time knew like, oh, that doesn't really matter. Like, this is what matters. Like, I'm feeling it for myself. So first step, this sincere aspiration to awaken. And, our aspiration, it waxes and wanes. So there's also, like, in this, like, what supports you in remembering your aspiration? What supports you in connecting to your aspiration for spiritual practice? So it's something I find that I really need to remind myself of. And there are times when I can just ride it, like it's so strong in me. I wake up and there it is. And there are other times like, reading the sutras or coming to a Dharma teaching or doing retreat really help me reconnect in a deep way to the felt sense of that aspiration. And the next thing she says, sincere aspiration to awaken and to cultivate a heart of compassion. So this practice of Zen, and we were really talking about this when we were looking at the engaged Buddhism precepts, it's grounded in the Bodhisattva vow. It's grounded in this deep heart of compassion, and compassion as expressed in this vow to awaken with all beings, together with all beings. And so that's like sometimes in the Tibetan tradition they call absolute bodhicitta, really seeing our deep interconnection and really connecting to this vow, may all beings awaken. What I was calling last week, collective liberation. And then there's like relative bodhicitta, like, oh, in this situation, in this relationship with this person who's so judgmental and I live with them, like, how do I stay connected to the heart of compassion? Or in this political sphere that I move in, or in my family of origin. It's like all of the people and places and relationships that we find ourselves in, all of that is an opportunity to cultivate compassion when we're really like on this spiritual path. So that's the second component of practice that she emphasizes, that the teacher emphasizes for Chiyono. And next, and in a way, I feel like she's also affirming that for Chiyono, you have this. You have this heart of compassion. Let it grow. Recognize it in yourself. That's often, sometimes we doubt even that. Like, am I compassionate enough to do this? And in some ways, like in this interaction that we're seeing, like the teacher is saying, yes, because you are here, because you're asking for help, because you want to wake up. Yes, that's the heart of compassion right there. Feel it. It's in you. And then she emphasizes this teaching that really helps cut through Chiyono's self-doubt. Because she's doubting like she's not good enough compared to others. Other people can read, can write, fill in the blank. What are the things you compare yourself to others? What are the ways that you feel maybe not good enough or inadequate on the spiritual path or in other aspects of your life? And she says, like, we are complete as we are. You are complete as you are. This path isn't about like how much you've read. Actually, sometimes that can get in the way. This path isn't about like how many achievements you have, or if you won the spelling bee in second grade, or if you got an F in spelling in the second grade. It's not about that. Even if you got an F in religion in college, like it's not about that. We are complete as we are. We don't need to add anything extra. We don't need to measure up like how many thoughts we had today that weren't about Buddhism. It's not what this is about. We are complete as we are, and it's recognizing that. And so she also gives that to Chiyono, like that's what this is about. You don't need to worry. You are enough. You have all you need. Now, there's this beautiful line from Zenju Earthland Manuel where she's talking about going to the Zendo, and she's saying like I always think like, what do I need to bring? And then I remind myself, oh, nothing, just myself. And then the last thing the teacher says is the practice. Like maybe the more doing aspect of the practice. These other parts are, reflections or, also part of the practice, more a part of the view. Like this aspiration to awaken, to cultivate compassion, to remember that you are complete as you are. And then she says, recognize delusive thoughts and look into their source. And Chiyono like leaves like all inspired, like, yes, I feel that too sometimes when I leave talking to my teacher and I'm not actually quite sure what they said, but I'm like, yes, I'm gonna do it, yes. It's okay, recognize the lose. And she says something like, oh, with this practice as my companion, this is all I need to do day and night. I want to talk a little bit more about what that is as a practice. What are delusive thoughts? how do we actually practice with the thinking mind? So the Buddha has a teaching of recognizing what thoughts cause suffering, what thoughts lead to judgment, suffering, separation, a sense of alienation, and then also to recognize what thoughts lead to understanding, compassion, loving kindness, and joy, and to work on cultivating the thoughts that lead to understanding, compassion, loving kindness, and joy, and not to feed the thoughts that separate or alienate. And it's like not to feed them with our attention, and that we have choice there. Like when we really feed the thoughts of judgment or separation or blame, like they get stronger. And so to look into the source of, oh, where is that coming from? When I start to go on the blame train or on the self-doubt train, like what was the source of that thought? And to recognize what thoughts, bring you back to your vow, to cultivating compassion, to clarity of heart and mind. What thoughts connect you to your creativity or are purposeful or necessary for living your life. It's not necessarily like we have to get rid of those thoughts or any thoughts for that matter. This is an invitation to look into thoughts. So if you're having lots of delusive thoughts, it's like, great, you've got material. You've got something to work with here. And so, how else do we notice if this is a delusive thought pattern? One is to start to recognize, well, what is the agenda underneath a thought or a belief? Does this thought have an agenda? Or is it, sometimes our thoughts are very wispy and they don't stick around. But the ones that are sticky, we can, one practice we can do is trace the thought back and see how it feels in our body, if it's connected to an emotion, a feeling, a sensation, a memory. I have these very vivid experiences, especially during retreat when I've been able to really see how my mind works. And I have this memory of I was Tenzo, which is the head cook, and you're moving at a fast pace often, especially during retreat when you're the head cook at the monastery. And I pulled a pan out of the oven, and the oven mitts are historically way too short for the big pans that you're pulling out, so I burnt myself. And then I looked at the person who was chopping potatoes and had very angry thoughts towards that person. Which, I could trace back and say, oh, I was in pain. And the way my mind helped me avoid feeling the pain was to get angry at the person chopping potatoes. And it was so obvious, in that moment, that the person chopping potatoes, we were in silence. They had nothing to do with my experience. It's my mind was well, they were in your way. I wouldn't have burnt myself if they weren't standing there. So, that's one example. Or another time I noticed this more recently is I was at the airport and having some challenges with my flight, feeling a little anxious that I wasn't going to make my flight, and then my mind just started judging really surface level judgments towards everybody who was walking by, that emotional discomfort. So I'm doing it kind of backwards, but you can catch, oh, the mind's judging. Oh, what's going on? Is there a feeling here that I'm avoiding feeling or want to avoid feeling? And that's how the mind is kind of translating it, because sometimes it doesn't actually connect. It's actually not about that person at all, but it's more about a strategy to not feel something that's happening in the body. And then another way of working with thoughts is when we don't need to be thinking. And I think this is part of, how this practice really worked for Chiyono is she was doing a lot of simple tasks. And sometimes, at the monastery especially, like there's lots of simple tasks and there's a lot of times that you don't need to be thinking when you're on retreat. But in our daily lives too, we can like make up that, oh, when I go for my walk, I need to be thinking about what's going to happen next. But oftentimes we don't. Or when you're cleaning up after dinner, or like what are times during the day where actually like you can be more in your direct experience, and then study more like what is happening in the mind when I'm doing this task that I really don't need to be thinking. And there we can explore, well, where do thoughts come from? Even if the mind is like, well, I do need to be thinking, like, well, where does that thought come from? Where do they abide? What are they made of? Who is the one that's thinking? Even just a little bit of this inquiry can give us some perspective on what's happening in the thinking mind. So, as Chiyono says, like with this practice as my companion, I really love this line because this is really what practice can be. Breath practice, inquiry practice, precept practice, awareness, koans, whatever you're working with, whether it's on the cushion or off of the cushion, like it can become a companion, a friend, a reliable companion, a reliable resource. And so in this story, as Chiyono kept company with this practice of looking to the source of her delusive thoughts, she kept turning the mind. And probably not all of the time. She has this line like, I'll do this all day and all night. And, whenever we endeavor to practice, we also, like part of that is we forget and then we remember. And so she probably went through large swaths of the day like all of us do, forgetting what she was practicing. And maybe she went back to the nun that she was working with, and her teacher asks her, well, how's it going? And she's like, I remember to do it like 10% of the time. She's like, okay, keep trying, keep remembering. And then it becomes more and more second nature. Keep company with this practice. And so as she did that, as she came back to the practice, looked back at the nature of thought, started to notice, so what are delusive thoughts anyway? She started to have insight, which, this is what happens with us too. If we picked up this practice, we would start to see things. We'd start to see perhaps, and you probably have had this insight in your own practice, like, oh, thoughts are slippery. Thoughts are sometimes responses to not wanting to feel something that's uncomfortable in our bodies. Maybe, at some point she had the insight thoughts of separation actually feel painful. Maybe thoughts when I'm connected to the Bodhisattva vow, there's a vitality, a sense of openness. Maybe she noticed when I try to grab a hold of a thought, it slips away. I can't actually, even the most delusive thought, I can't really seem to find it after I think it. It's gone, vanishes. Maybe there's like a feeling tone left in the body or in the heart, but that too eventually, if I try to grab a hold of it, it slips away. Maybe she noticed when I really get wrapped up in my worries, they get louder. But when I feel the anxiety in my body without a story, it passes. And that I can do that. That's another insight that can happen with this kind of practice. Like, oh, I can actually stay with the embodied experience. And though it's uncomfortable, like I do have that capacity. So Chiyono's poem, it's her insight, but it's also her teaching. And that's what can happen with openings or insights. So like, this koan is constructed in a way where she's probably having like lots of these smaller insights on an ongoing basis. And maybe some are like really registering, like, oh, wow, like thoughts slip away when I look for the thinker. I can't find someone there. Oh, wow, it's kind of spacious actually around my thoughts. Like she's having these little insights. And then what happens? The bottom falls out of her bucket. Right? And so it's like kind of a symbolic experience for what has been happening as she's been working with this koan, and she has like a bigger aha. That really can like wake us up when something externally like mirrors or kind of acts as a metaphor for an internal process. And so using that metaphor of the bucket, she kind of writes this poem that can become a continued teaching and exploration of this, because she has this bigger insight. But what inevitably happens is, we forget. Thoughts come back, the sticky, delusive thoughts come back, but she now has seen it from a different perspective. And so in a way, even if she forgets temporarily, that knowing of the bucket falling, the bottom of the bucket falling out, has changed something in a way that she can't unknow. So she says, with this and that, I tried to keep this bucket together, but the bottom fell out. Where the water does not collect, the moon does not dwell. So part of what she saw was that her thoughts build up this sense of self, and that it actually takes work, to patch this sense of self together with thoughts, because thoughts just keep disappearing. But that's often what the mind is so busy doing. So to see this weaving together, this is very similar to what the Buddha saw on the night of his awakening. To see this weaving together, this sense of me, like there's this recalling of the past, there's this worry about the future, there's some judgment about the present, there's this recollection of the past, some resentment from 10 years ago. And the mind's just constantly doing that, moving from, even a few seconds past to a few seconds in the future, to what's happening now, to 10 years ago, to 3 years from now, to what's happening now-ish, and it's just constantly doing that. And so we have this sense of continuity of me. Oh yeah, I was really mad yesterday. Oh yeah, I should be worried about what's going to happen. Oh yeah, this isn't working out very well. I'm hot right now. I'm cold. I'm irritated. And it's just like weaving together, often kind of underneath the surface. And so this bucket is being built of I, me, mine, this narrative of the self. And she sees through that, with this image of the bottom falling out, like, oh, this never was sturdy to begin with. Actually, it's more of a prison than an expression of freedom to be weaving, to trying to hold together this bucket of the self. There's this poem by Uchiyama Roshi that uses very similar imagery. He says, water isn't formed by being ladled into a bucket. Simply the water of the whole universe has been ladled into a bucket. The water does not disappear because it has been scattered over the ground. It is only that the water of the whole universe has been emptied into the whole universe. Life is not born because a person is born. The life of the whole universe has been ladled into the hardened idea called I. Life does not disappear because a person dies. Simply the life of the whole universe has been poured out of this hardened idea of I back into the universe.